most powerful ways to make a difference, to help others, our chapter, and to also enhance your well-being. If you've been thinking about stepping out of your comfort zone to do something meaningful in 2021, this is your chance. PwC has a range of incredible opportunities for someone new to the industry, as well as a seasoned professional. Remember, all of our profits go to scholarships to assist students pursuing their degrees in the AEC industry. Committees where we could use some volunteers include programs, sponsorship, mentorship, scholarship, awards, and communications. Please contact me, one of our board members, or committee chairs for more information. I will put my contact info in the chat function for you in a few minutes. Our program will begin in just a few moments, but we want to take this time to recognize and thank our executive, annual, and foundation sponsors listed on these slides for their support. We could not do this without them. You can learn more about these firms by visiting our website, www.pwc.org. We are extremely grateful for their commitment to our chapter. Just want to let you know that we do have a program sponsor for this evening, Harry Grotsky and Company, and we truly thank them as well for their support. Thank you for your belief in PwC, our shared vision of an integrated community, and for being so incredibly supportive, which has been vital to our success. I will hand this off to Susan now, who will start the program. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. We're so happy to have you with us. This is a program that we have done in the past, but this evening we're doing it with a slightly different focus because commercial real estate truly is a sector in transition. So before we introduce our speakers, I would like to acknowledge and thank the members of the PwC Program Committee who worked so hard on the preparations for this event. They are, in alphabetical order, Lauren Askloff of Shipman & Goodwin LLP, Tracy Barrett of Shama Design and Construction, Pat Bellato, Van Zelm Engineers, Kathy DeFrancis Vittorio of Fuss & O'Neill, Melissa Roy of Tecton Architects, Amy Ray of Newman Architects. Actually, she is now with EDM, excuse me, I apologize for that. And last but by no means least, Tanya Cotolo of Slam Construction Services. To maximize the time allotted to us, we will focus, as we always do, on the program content rather than on extended introductions. I'm very pleased to introduce our panel this evening, and in alphabetical order, they are Joe DeLong, who is the Executive Director of the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, David Lehman, Commissioner and Senior Economic Advisor for the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development, Patrick McMahon, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Connecticut Main Street Center, Kent Schwendy, President and CEO of the Corporation for Independent Living, Adam Winstanley, who is Principal of Winstanley Enterprises, LLC, and our moderator for the evening, Courtney Hendrickson, who is Vice President of Partnerships for Advance Connecticut. I am now going to turn the program over to Courtney's very capable hands and let the program start.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks, everybody. Great to be here. All of us, thank you for having us. And I know all of these panelists personally, they are all rock stars, and we're in for a great hour here. So let's just jump right in. The year 2020 was unlike any other, primarily because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The virus is likely to affect commercial real estate throughout 2021 and beyond, and economic forecasts present a mixed picture. The market is expected to continue to be asset class specific, with some asset classes seeing more negative impacts than others. Everyone is aware that uncertainty about the pandemic put a damper on transaction deal volume in 2020 and significant pressure on certain property types, most especially hotel and retail. However, other property types have performed really pretty well and have held steady. And new COVID trends have created multiple bright spots, including in multifamily, industrial, and life sciences especially. Today, we will be taking a closer look at these trends and the opportunities that you may want to keep in mind for 2021 and beyond. I'm going to field some questions to specific panelists. And panelists, if you want to add to a question that I haven't called on you for, just give me a nod and we can do that. We have several topics tonight, so we're going to be moving fast. First, we'll cover market fundamentals. What can we expect for the commercial real estate industry in Southern New England in 2021 and 22? And I'm going to start, Adam, with you, asking how does New England compare to the US real estate market?
Well, I think the New England markets, operate very kind of independently and different from the rest of the country. There's a lot of unique things happening in New England that are different than other parts of the country. But from, broadly speaking, the industrial markets in New England right now are incredibly strong with a limited or very little supply of developable land. And it's creating probably the fastest run up in industrial rents that I've ever seen in commercial real estate. So I've been in commercial real estate now for 31 years, and I've been operating successfully in Connecticut for about 26 years or so. We did our first deal in 1994. And I was talking with one of my broker relationships the other day, and we were laughing that all kind of industrial rents in Connecticut used to be between $2.50 and $3 a foot. And it was that way for a number of years. And right now, the last rent that I just completed, was in the low sixes for a 350,000 square foot lease at the JCPenney property. And the rents right now are solidly in the $6 a foot range in Connecticut, which I've never seen before. And then in Massachusetts, the rents are in the $9 a foot range. And what's unique about New England is that there's no land available. So if you went to really any other part of the country, let's say besides Inland Empire in California, but Atlanta or some of these other markets, there's a lot of land available. There's a lot of spec construction. But New England right now is experiencing tremendous industrial growth with really no supply coming online. So it's pushing all the rents up very rapidly right now. And there's really not a lot of opportunities to deliver a lot of spec construction. And then the main challenges in New England is it's, a lot of the sites here are wet. There's a lack of utility infrastructure. There's site impediments. And the permitting environment in New England is very, very challenging. Permitting industrial buildings for new construction, you can spend easily 3 to 5 years to permit a warehouse. So it's not an easy process. So I think the industrial as a whole is performing very well in New England. Adaptive reuse projects, to the extent that there's manufacturing buildings that can be rehabbed, they're continuing to perform well. The last major kind of rehab project that I did for adaptive reuse was the former Hallmark campus up in Enfield. We took 1 million square feet of former manufacturing space and converted it to distribution space and leased that back up to 3 different companies. But there's less buildings now available to do those types of projects. And especially in Connecticut, a lot of the good sites have either been absorbed and already redeveloped, or they've been knocked down, and buildings like, the Pratt & Whitney building in North Haven, for example, got knocked down and became an Amazon warehouse, or Aetna's former campus in Middletown became FedEx. So that's kind of that's kind of what's going on. I'll quickly just cover really quick. I'll try and cover life science. Life science and medical is on fire in Massachusetts and Connecticut. The space has seen a major kind of rebirth, and I think a lot of that has to do with the optics around COVID. Our country has been able to produce 2 leading vaccine candidates between Moderna and Pfizer. And I think it's put a renewed spotlight on the importance of science and biotech. And Metro Boston is booming. GMP manufacturing space is booming. And obviously our company is heavily involved in the life science business in Connecticut. And we're working feverishly right now, trying to get our 101 College Street project off the ground, which is going to be a signature lab project that we've been working on for several years, and it's complicated and it's a big project, but it has incredible promise for the region and the state, and so we're very excited about that industry and what that can offer in Connecticut. I can just touch base briefly on retail. We are active in retail. We have projects in a number of different states. I have a major project in Manchester, Connecticut. We're getting ready to announce shortly. We've just signed another major anchor lease at that property. It's an open air center that we bought a few years ago that was underperforming. There's a lot of unique trends in retail that are probably worth chatting a little bit about tonight that are very unique. I think malls are in kind of rapid decline. And I think there's a lot of retailers out there right now that are performing exceptionally well. Too many to name right now, but certainly the obvious ones like Target and Walmart, Costco. But Best Buy and Dick's and a lot of those types of retailers have all shifted. They're omni-channel, they're selling products online, they're doing brick and mortar really well. They're super profitable. But they're also starting to make changes in their retail boxes that are going to reshape the industry. They're all moving to drive up windows or pick up online locations, and that's going to reshape the industry again. And a lot of open air shopping centers, the boxes will also be last mile delivery stations. So I think that's going to change a lot of things as well. And we are not a believer that that retail is just going to be wiped out. It's going to change. We definitely have way too much retail space. We don't need to have each state doesn't need to have 7 or 8 malls. It's probably only 1 or 2 are going to survive. But retail is going to change. It's not going to go away. Stores are going to be modified to become both walk-in locations, but also online delivery stations as well.
Thanks, Adam. Great initial summary here. Let's get into the changes in the workplace. And you've talked quite a bit about changes in different sectors. As a result of the pandemic, the physical place for many of us has shifted, and certainly attitudes have shifted around working from home. So in terms of the perspective of both employees as well as business owners, I want to throw out some questions. Joe, I'm going to start with you. What are you seeing that are the needs of the corporate offices? Are they downsizing? Are they renovating? Are they creating alternate workspaces? Tell us what you're seeing out there.
Oh, thanks, Courtney. Let me just begin by saying I think this is about the 4th year that I've done this. And I would just like to point out today that I wasn't just doing it for the filet mignon. I am back virtually, so I really enjoy the opportunity to be with you every year and have these conversations. What I can really speak to is our organization, how we're looking at things at CCM and going through this process. We have about 128 employees. And we relocated in 2018 and built out a 30,000 square foot office complex, a modern, beautiful facility. And I can tell you, if we were doing that today, it would be vastly different than what we did pre-pandemic. Just had this conversation with our board of directors. Is what does the new normal look like after the pandemic is over? And I think one thing that we know for certain is we are going to have to change the way that we allow people to work in order to stay competitive, both from a retention as well as a recruitment standpoint. Our organization in particular across the board has actually seen our productivity increase when we went to full remote working. We certainly are not the type of organization that would ever stay fully remote, but we will certainly also have to adapt and offer some sort of a hybrid model in order, again, to recruit talent and retain talent and allow people the option to work some in the office and some in another location of their convenience. Also, from our perspective of how we developed our offices we had collaborative workspaces and people were kind of set up in pods that worked really well. But if we were to redo our offices today, I don't know that we would necessarily have a lot less square footage. We may reduce our footprint a little bit, but our layout would be vastly different. We'd have many more collaborative type workspaces, along with some hoteling type areas within the office space, and a lot less of the four wall type of office environment. It's simply going forward. I really believe that as we come together on as a staff, well, it may be more regularly, or maybe on some sort of a regular basis, but that'll be more for staff meetings, collaborative work, and that sort of thing. People will be performing a lot more of their day-to-day routines from their homes or other locations. So, I can't tell you exactly what it's going to look like, but I can tell you, at least from our perspective and the studying that we've been doing of the marketplace, where we need to fit into the marketplace, as well as talking to my colleagues, not only from other state leagues, but also from other state risk insurance pools, some of which are very large across the country, but they're all going through the same exercise. And they all believe that the new normal is going to look, well, not the same as it's looked during the pandemic, certainly. It is going to look different and perhaps vastly different than what the old normal did.
Thanks, Joe. David, talk to us about the shift of corporations. Are they moving back to the suburbs is one very pointed question that this audience has. And in general, what you're seeing around office conversions, that kind of thing.
All right, so there's a lot to unpack there. In terms of, I'm going to try to be as concise as possible. Are corporations making big decisions in terms of physical footprint and location? I haven't seen that. I think there's been so much uncertainty in terms of pandemic duration, when folks go back to the office. We all recall it was last Labor Day, then it became New Year's, and now it's this summer for many companies. So there haven't been a lot of decisions. Where we've seen activity in terms of companies we're talking to, has been in smaller cities and suburbs, but this is Connecticut. That's what we really have. We can have a longer debate about the structural vacancy in some of the office markets around Connecticut, like Stamford and Hartford for that matter. And I don't think that is going away, even if there is a shift to the suburbs, personally. So I think you will see more location decisions, but I don't expect anything dramatic in the coming few months. Most of the companies that we talk to, their physical footprints, they estimate being down 10%. Some companies will tell you up to 50%. So we'll see. I'm a firm believer that some amount of work from home for what was a conventional right down the middle office worker, I think that is here to stay. And I'm not sure if that's 1 day a week, 3 days a week, something in that zip code. Some companies might try to be more aggressive, but I personally think the market for talent is going to demand some work from home flexibility. And I think you're going to see that in the office market. So I do think that is bearish for office markets, whether in New York City or places like Connecticut. I think it's going to be a challenge. And I personally think you're going to see more acceleration where possible. Obviously not the suburban office, but conversions to residential, I think, are going to be in greater demand, or should be in greater demand in the future, because I think that structural vacancy is here, and if arguably is getting worse in certain office markets. So we'll track it, but I think the trend is smaller physical footprints, more work from home. I do think you'll see more moves to kind of less dense locations, but the jury's still out on the latter point.
Thanks, David. Kent, do you want to weigh in on the idea around cleaner, healthier buildings? Because of COVID, a lot of companies are looking at healthier interiors, air exchange issues. Do you want to weigh in there at all?
Yeah, I think the challenge that we're all facing is that the rules have suddenly changed. In the development world, we thrive on two things, on growth and change. So, growth has not been great over the last few years. And of course, we took a big shrinkage, so it's going to take a while just to come back. But from a standpoint of change, we got change everywhere, right? So there should be great opportunity for developers. And to get to your specific question, that's a microcosm of the bigger picture. What is a healthy building in today's environment? Do we have to get rid of all of the open air spaces? Is it best to increase air filtration or the circulation capacities? There are a lot of smart people looking at that, and they're coming up with varying answers. So I think the problem is when you look at those types of solutions, an HVAC system, you're looking at a 12 to 15 year life. So you have to guess right what those changes need to be. And I think everybody is interested in seeing them. What we've done over the last, little more than a year, have been tweaking with the existing systems. But what we haven't been doing in many places other than in the healthcare industry is doing things like putting in, ultralight, ultraviolet light cleaners on HVAC systems. We've just been turning up the fans so they blow faster. There's some people will argue that makes it worse because it moves the air around more if you're not filtering it properly. So it's all about filtration. Well, filtration tends to slow air down, so it works the other way. So I think, it's kind of a long way of saying I don't know the answer to your question, but there are going to be changes, and those standards will be provided in the future. And the landlords who are able to do that will be meeting the market, and people will be moving to those buildings. And people who can't or won't make those changes will start to lose people and tenants. And that goes back to change. We may not need more of anything, but we're going to need different things in different places. And, that's an opportunity, and as part of how the built environment changes over time. So I hope that, in the not distant future, we'll have more specific answers. But for right now, all I can say is, yes, there'll be changes, and we're all going to have to try to keep up with it.
Thanks, Kent. Let's shift gears to talk a little bit about transit-oriented development. So the long-awaited expansion of public transportation includes buses, rail, air travel. Options in southern New England are greater than they've been. We're seeing an increase in this kind of development and a rise in property values of real estate located adjacent to public transit. Patrick, I'd like you to weigh in on whether you are also seeing this. Is this observation something that you can validate? What additional development are you seeing that's planned and predicted around transit?
Oh, I can definitely validate it. The communities that have a rail stop on the Hartford line, Metro North, Shoreline East, the branch lines of Metro North, all of them are seeing an uptick in development. Along the Hartford line itself, hundreds of new housing units have come online. In Windsor Locks, a 250,000 square foot mill building was converted to 160 units of mixed income housing. Downtown Windsor, an apartment complex was built with 130 units. So we're seeing that up and down the line, as well as Connecticut Fast Track. You heard probably from different sectors that, should the state have invested in that designated bus line, it's paying dividends from a development standpoint for both West Hartford, as well as New Britain with brand new apartment complexes. And I see opportunities galore. What my advice to folks in the ACE world would be to reach out, get the TOD plan, the transit-oriented development plan that was developed for almost every station area in the state of Connecticut. Take a look, see what the opportunities are, and then reach out to the local economic developer or town planner and really narrow down and figure out what the opportunity sites are. see if it's a good fit for your agency, and then reach out to the developer friends that you work with and get them on board with developing around these stations. We might as well do it. The infrastructure is already there. The state's made tremendous investments in all of these locations. It helps with the grand list growth for the communities. And I think it's a in-demand thing for our millennial talent workforce. They want to be in locations like that.
Thanks, Patrick. David, do you want to add to that?
I listen, I wholeheartedly agree. I think pandemic or not, you know, the TOD, livable, walkable areas, main streets, small cities, that trend is here to stay. And I think it's beyond millennials. I think that's just more desirable from a convenience perspective. And that's more of a, you know, in my opinion, multi-generational macro trend that is here to stay. And we need to embrace it. You know, we can have a long conversation on NIMBYism in the state and trying to, you know, welcome growth as opposed to not welcome growth. I think we need to shift our culture here in Connecticut in particular on that a bit more to be growth seeking. But I totally agree with what Patrick said, whether it's the fast track in the Hartford area, Metro North, around CT Transit. I just think those types of development opportunities is good business, candidly, and good for the state.
Thanks, David. Kent, from the developer's perspective, is that a factor for you when you're considering new projects?
It definitely is a factor, and I agree with Patrick and David that from an aspirational standpoint, it's exactly what we should be pursuing. From a development standpoint, you know, the market is higher in those areas. You can afford to do more. There's less risk in those areas. There's more support from the state. The permitting is easier in some ways. They have everything going for them. The only thing I would, you know, kind of do as a caution is say, we can't take our foot off the gas, which is maybe mixing my metaphor since we're talking about transit. But my point is that right now in Connecticut, even though we have transit nodes that are starting up, we still have a very auto-centric overall economy. And until the car becomes an optional commodity, until you don't have to own a car to live comfortably in a location, it's not really fully functionally as transit oriented. It's really more of a transit ready or transit accessible. We're not quite there yet. We have to keep pushing. But the way we'll get there is by focusing the development around those areas. So as a developer, we're looking at that because, you know, we can look at things that it has to be a parking lot today, but it can be future growth 10 years from now when the market will allow it. And that's, you know, huge opportunity. So there are a lot of long-term pluses for transit-oriented development as well, as long as a community, we keep supporting them and we keep growing there. You know, David's right. That's where the market wants to be. It's not just the millennials. Those are the hot markets of the future. If we invest in those, we'll be doing well in the future. But we have to keep our eye on that and focus on it.
Courtney, can I just add really quick that
Please.
a lot of the municipalities that have those stations, they are actually desirous of the new development. They're marketing those sites. They want to build their grand list around those stations. So don't think that it's necessarily NIMBY in every community.
A great point, Patrick. Let's talk about technology and innovation within construction. So according to the firm JLL, COVID has reshaped the construction industry positively in its adoption of what's called ConTech or construction technology. The construction industry in 2020 adopted technology in 1 year that would have normally taken 3 years, according to this study by JLL. So Adam, I'll start with you. Have you seen this embrace of ConTech in the commercial construction industry?
100%. I mean, it's COVID has basically been a fire drill, if you will, to you know, automate as much as possible. I mean, I can't tell you how many stories, whether, you know, it's construction companies, it's private developers, it's state agencies like Deep that have, you know, automated their systems and eliminated paper. But there's no question. I mean, I look at our own company, you know, we've been making significant software and technology investments for the last couple of years, just to eliminate paper, create efficiency. And when COVID came, a lot of companies were able to flip the switch. They were already in the cloud. People could quickly dial into networks from wherever they were and seamlessly operate. I tell you one thing, if you were not automated before COVID, you are now, because when COVID came and things shut down, you basically would be out of business. And so I think it has created an incredible technology acceleration. And as everything has moved into the cloud, I mean, there is 100%. I mean, people can operate from anywhere right now. I mean, I just look at my own company. I mean, we have one young woman who's her family moved back to Toronto, and she's operating in our construction group from Toronto. You know, we have one employee and who took a 1-month vacation in South Carolina. I have another employee in Sarasota right now. I mean, people have moved around and they're continuing to operate with various technology platforms that we've, got in our different divisions. But I think it's been incredible. I think productivity has gone through the roof for a lot of companies. People are really questioning travel. That's changed, and things like Zoom and conference calls and different types of platform, instead of getting in the car and driving 3 hours to a meeting or jumping on a plane. I mean, everybody is reevaluating different ways to communicate and be productive, and it's turned upside down. I think everything's different, and there are some good things, not a lot, but there are some good things that have come out of COVID. And I think productivity and people learning that with technology, there's a lot of different ways that they can contribute and work in different environments has been a good thing.
Thanks, Adam. Joe, I know you like to weigh in on technology stuff in general. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing, whether it's the specific technologies that you're seeing in various industries or what you're seeing as the new norm?
Courtney, before he answers, can I just point out that he does have some steaks cooking behind him on a barbecue, so I don't think he was entirely genuine earlier.
I completely leave out the filet mignon. I just didn't require you to provide it, that's all. So, yeah, Courtney, it's interesting. First of all, it's funny what you say about me weighing in on technology issues, because I'm still trying to figure out all the things that Outlook can do and how to utilize all of my email. But obviously, one of the things that is becoming even more pressing, particularly at the local government level, that we're trying to get people to understand is that it's not just the advances in technology, but the ongoing need for infrastructure in terms of security, and being able to be nimble, being able to adapt and be adaptable, and to be able to be safe. I mean, we see more and more security breaches. We see sometimes challenges with old legacy systems that just simply don't meet the modern day needs of running, whether it's a community or a business or anything else for that matter, effectively and efficiently. So I think this is an area that we're going to have to continue to contribute a significant amount of focus and a significant amount of resources. Look, resources become limited, whether it's in government, whether it's in our towns and cities, or our state government, or whether it's in the business community. But in terms of priorities, it used to be that you would build a business and you have these different departments, and then somewhere over in the corner, down the hall, behind a wall that half the people don't even know exists, is your IT department. That's not the way that it is anymore, at least for places that are successful. Your IT department is right beside your executive departments, much the way that your HR director and your finance department and all those groups have been for years, because it's such a critical component going forward of our success. And what we get called far too often is on the back end of something, when somebody has a breach, they have a challenge, or they have a crash or something of that nature, and they realize not only the liability exposure that's created, but also the incredible amount of productivity and manpower hours that are lost because of it. The other thing, Courtney, that I would just point out, I talked about, the relocation that we did a couple years ago. We're also currently in the process of upfitting a building, a smaller location that we purchased near the state capitol in Hartford. And one of the critical components when we met with potential contractors and when we met with architects is we wanted to understand their technology capabilities in terms of communicating the decision-making and the visual aspects and all the different things that our board and that our members needed to see. So, we actually interviewed, I thought, some very good architects who are a little more old school, and we didn't feel like they had the technology to appropriately communicate their vision or their progress on an ongoing basis with our membership. So we sort of eliminated them for that reason. So, I would agree with David and others. I think not only is this, it's not just a wave of the future, it's here now, but it's going to have to be something that people are dedicating and making it a priority and dedicating their resources toward, because it's an ongoing and growing need in order to be competitive in today's market.
Thanks, guys. Anyone else want to weigh in on this topic? All right, let's move to life science. Adam, I know you touched on it at the beginning, but I think because it has been such a bright spot this past year in commercial real estate, that we really want to just dig into it a little bit more. So it's been seen as a safe haven amid the disruption of the pandemic. It's all about the COVID therapeutics and vaccines that you mentioned. And certainly the general aging of the American population plays a role there too. It's been forecast that life sciences will be ongoingly, increasingly in demand for lab space through 2025. So David, do you want to start there and talk a little bit about projects that we're seeing in Connecticut?
Well, why don't Adam's probably, I don't want to steal his thunder. He's got the biggest potential project going on. So I'll let him start and then I'll jump in after if that works, Courtney.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's really an incredible time to be in the life science business, and we're very fortunate to have pioneered the lab business down in New Haven, and we've done other lab oriented projects around New England and other states, but we have really super concentrated, and it's really been more my brother Carter who has super focused on life science, and my focus has been more on the uglier components of real estate like warehouses and things of that nature, and he's been able to build the sexier, better looking buildings. But the short story is we started with 300 George Street, which in 2000, February of 2000, we purchased the largest building in New Haven vacant, and have progressed to 100 College Street. And each of these projects have been super complicated building, high-rise urban projects. And, we're very, proud to be working on, 101 College, which, we're partnering really with, the state of Connecticut. David's been working very closely with Carter and our CFO, and working with Yale and our anchor tenants, the city of New Haven, as well as other state agencies, to get a very, very large and complicated project off the ground. But we're probably 60 days away from starting construction on our third biotech building, which is going to be around 500,000, maybe a little bit larger. And, I can't say too much more about that, but the profile of the building, I can say that it is significantly pre-leased with a number of major lab commitments that we're working on early. The leases are all kind of being finalized, so I don't want to say any more than that, because I'll get a quick text from Carter that we're saying too much. But It's a project that we've been working on and planning for several years. Beginning of COVID had some real challenges associated with it, due more to the fact that a lot of the banks had their credit lines pulled in the US, so there was a vacuum of no financing. But this project is it's gonna really power up New Haven's lab business, and I'm bullish that the lab can grow in other parts of the state as well. I mean, New Haven obviously is where we've focused our efforts, but I think there's other locations, especially Farmington and in around the Yukon Health Center. So it's going to be a much bigger business in Connecticut. And as the biotech business grows, it creates growth opportunities in GMP manufacturing. That is expanding wildly in Metro Boston right now. As these drugs come online, I mean, you can see it with COVID, there's a global scramble for manufacturing capacity. And a lot of these companies have realized there's way too much capacity overseas. And a lot of that is coming back to domestic production. But I think it's a tremendous opportunity for the state of Connecticut, New England, which has a dearth of incredible universities with a lot of good science. So a lot of good trends. I think medical office space is also going to continue to grow. So it's a very exciting time in that industry, and our country itself should be incredibly proud of both Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson. I mean, we're leading the world in biotech innovation, the development of drugs and vaccines, and all of these companies are doing incredible work. It's shining a very unique spotlight on the industry. The industry has stepped up, and to think that we could be sitting here a year later, all of us getting, vaccines at some point, and hopefully, COVID will be behind us at some point soon. It's really an incredible time, and it's doing a lot of good things for the industry right now.
Thanks, Adam. Courtney, I would just add to that, the project that Adam and Carter and the Win Stanley Enterprises are doing in New Haven, 101 College. There has been some stuff public that we can share. As Adam mentioned, 500,000 square feet is a very significant building. There will be pre-lease space, as well as importantly, an incubator component. And this is something that we think is really going to be important, where you need to be, for the entrepreneurial side of things here in biotech, you need to be in person, you need to be with certain lab capabilities, and the location couldn't be better in New Haven, kind of Main and Main, in my opinion, between the medical campus, the hospital, and obviously the New Haven Green and Yale's campus there further east. So we're very bullish on this being transformational in New Haven, and I think the goal is to keep working on the density there to make sure that we have the full ecosystem, and that we come up the state. There's a lot of idea generation and IP coming out of Yale, in particular on the health side. We need to do a better job capturing those tenants and commercializing that, and making sure that they have a place to either start their company or grow into is going to be great. And I think really will be transformational for not just the city, but the whole state, beyond New Haven as well in biotech. So very, very bullish on lab space and this project in particular.
Thanks, David. We've talked about technology, we've talked about life science growing. On the other hand, New England has a rich history of where we revere the past and we suspect change, right? Think about the Pilgrims, the Founding Fathers, historic town centers. Patrick, you know all about that. Former industrial centers, Ivy League universities. So all of that contributes to a culture where we are called the land of steady habits, that we're always fighting against that. The result requires a different approach to development. So Kent, I'd love to hear your comments about this, and others, I will ask you to chime in as well. What are some strategies that you're using to succeed in this kind of environment, often a parochial mindset? Adam, you referred earlier to how hard sometimes the municipal permitting can be, et cetera.
Yeah, and I have a friend who refers to it as the land of steady suspicions, which I think is actually even more accurate. It seems like, whenever you go in on a project, everybody thinks that you're trying to get away with something, and everybody thinks that you're trying to do something that's going to hurt them. And there are evil developers out there. I'm not going to try to defend everybody in the industry, but for the most part, we are trying to provide what the communities and what the market wants. So I think for us, the key has always been to try to focus on engagement and trying to get to the source of what the real suspicions are. What are those steady habits that we're telling them they have to change or asking them to change? What can we do to try to mitigate those changes and make it seem like less of a change for them or less of an impact for them? And I think it's just that process of engagement. And like Adam said, the process in New England is long. There are other states where you can walk in and the municipality says, how fast can you start? And it's not like that in New England. In New England, you have to start by making sure that, the municipal folks are kind of behind you and understand what you're doing. And then you have to find out who are the people in the community that are if not the agitators, the organizers, the connectors. How do you reach them? And how do you start painting the picture the way that you want the story to be told, rather than the way that people will twist it if they just start with no knowledge? So it's really, to me, it's all just about communication. And in a certain sense, it's actually more fun because you engage with the community and they care. I will say I've done development in other parts of the country, and sometimes I wonder if anybody noticed or if anybody cared. And so at least in Connecticut, when you finish a project, you know you had an impact. Sometimes you're wondering if you're going to be burned in effigy, but other times, people will come and say, you know what, I thought this was a bad idea, but I actually am really glad that we did this. And when they start saying we, that's when you know that you've won.
Considering, and Patrick and Joe, you guys can attest to this too, how much work we do coaching our towns and cities around becoming business friendly, becoming developer friendly. That tells you kind of everything you need to know about the New England initial assumptions. But Patrick, I'd love to have you weigh in, and Joe too, on this.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on what Kent said. It's really important to go in early and meet up with the town staff. That's the town planner, the economic developers. They already have a sense of the community and what potentially could be approved. They have the best knowledge of their own regulations. So early and often with the staff, I think, is really important. If it's a bigger project, I think that if you can get the municipal CEO, so for Joe's group, if you have the municipal CEO behind a project, it's much greater chance that you're going to get the ultimate approval. I think you also want to, like, as Ken said, you want to set the stage and talk about why this is important to your community, the project itself. What are the assets it's bringing by way of either jobs or new tax revenue? And I think that in this day and age with technology, you actually can utilize some tech to tell the story using drone footage. I've seen some of this new 3D technology that's happening. There's a project, a streetscape, for instance, in Derby, where they basically show what it's going to look like at the end of the day. If you can use some of that visual technology to help sell the project, I think that certainly could be very helpful in your endeavors.
Thanks, Patrick. Joe?
Hey, normally, Courtney, I would say I always like for Patrick to go after me because he's always positive and solution oriented. And sometimes I can come across with a little bit of negativity and don't mean to do that necessarily. But I would be honest, I think we're in a very historical, dangerous place in Connecticut when it comes to our ability to modernize and to grow and to get out of this land of steady habits or land of steady suspicions. And I'll tell you why. In my lifetime, and people have different historical events in their lifetime. In my lifetime, one of the big historical events was obviously 9/11. And after 9/11 happened, I remember, and I was involved in government at some level then, I remember seeing how well people came together after that event and had, pride in their country, pride in their community, love of their neighbors. It was, to me, it was one of the, well, a very difficult time. It was one of the times in our nation's history when I saw us be closer together than maybe ever in my lifetime before or since. I think we're further apart right now than I've ever seen in my lifetime. And while we already have this very parochial nature in Connecticut, and look, it's not just with construction. I mean, look at how we do public education. We're a state that's the size of a county in most other states. That we do public education on such a parochial level that we've created massive education inequities just from one town to the next because it's how we're built. But now we've compounded that problem, and I've seen it within our organization because of the pandemic. One thing that we have succeeded in over the years at CCM is being able to bring together the urban, suburban, and rural communities, the Democrats, the Republicans, the different philosophies, and put people in a room together and feed them a meal and get them to understand how they were connected on the things that they agreed on instead of being defined by their differences. Now that we have to meet through Zoom and Microsoft Teams and go-to meetings, and we have to deal with the negativity that comes out of Washington at the federal level and starts to trickle down into state houses and starts to trickle down into our town halls, I feel like we're more suspicious of our neighbor now, even than we have ever been, even in my 6 years here in Connecticut. I think the pandemic and other national factors have led to that. And so I really believe that this is an area that everybody on here plays some leadership role. You may not think of yourself as, maybe just a leader within your company or within your neighborhood or whatever the case may be, your church, whatever it is. We have to start talking about the fact again that we are all interconnected. We have more in common than what we have in difference, and our success and failure, we're all very interdependent upon each other. Because right now, unfortunately, if that were the one piece of bad news that I would deliver from my perspective, I think the pandemic has really pushed us further in the opposite direction. And Connecticut, being so parochial, can ill afford to get in its own corner or its own bunker more than what it already was. And I think to some degree we are, simply because we're so isolated right now that's led to the problem. So it's going to take some real leadership, and I think a real concerted effort to get us out of that mode when the pandemic is behind us.
Thanks, Joe. Does anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I can provide a couple of thoughts. I mean, I would say that, our experiences with permitting in Connecticut and other states, we try and as a company take a very different approach where, primarily my brother Carter and I like to do more hands-on permitting, and we like to get into the community to build relationships with key people in the community, town staff, and others, as well as building our own relationships at the state level. And I think it's really important today. I think one of the things that is becoming a problem is permitting. As much as you need a legal team and you need professional staff, I think people are getting, farther and farther away from being able to explain the project, why it's good for the community, why it's good for the state, why it's good for the town, the region. And somebody has to be accountable. Somebody has to stand up and describe what you're trying to accomplish. And you have to have a sense of honestness. You have to care. You have to be able to answer the tough questions from the community. So we're really kind of doubling down on our efforts on not relying as much on outside attorneys. Our legal teams are part of the process, but they're not driving the communication and doing the presentations. And we're trying to stay connected to the communities that we work in so that people understand that we care, we're not going anywhere, we're going to be here. And that has been, that's helped our projects move forward in reasonable timeframes, which is certainly been helpful, because it does take time to permit whatever type of project it is, and time is money. So you really need to make sure that that you're building good relationships along the way in order to be successful.
Thanks, Adam. I concur with that. Again, just from the municipal seat that I've been in and coach on a lot, we're moving away from a transactional to more of a transformational approach to economic development at the local level. And communities are waking up to the fact that they should see benefits from the projects. As much as they want to see the commercial tax base grow, they also want a lot more than that these days. And I think that's a positive. So coming from both ends, appreciate that, all of you. So our last formal topic is back to outlook by sector, which is really where we started. The market is expected to continue to be very asset class specific through 21. So for office, retail, and hospitality, the question will be how lasting COVID changes will be and the magnitude of their return. Retail and office are predicted to have more of a W-shaped recovery, ups and downs based on individual markets, job growth, how quickly workers return, some of the things we've talked about here tonight. Medical office, as you mentioned before, Adam, remains attractive, generally a high occupancy there. Hospitality will likely have more of a U-shaped recovery, driven by that pent-up leisure demand. We're already seeing that. I know a lot of our friends are headed to Florida for spring break this week and next. Increased domestic travel to safe destinations. So in general, and I'll start with you, Patrick, concurring with these assessments, is this based on your knowledge and experience, what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I can concur that for both hospitality and retail, it'll be more of a ups and down trajectory, depending on how quickly the vaccines are effectuated across the state, and when people are going to feel comfortable to travel again. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, is even just being vaccinated doesn't necessarily mean after a year of being stuck in our homes that we're going to be ready to just run out there and go wild, even though that could happen. It could be the roaring 20s. We'll see how it turns out. I think that there is still, from the hospitality standpoint, there is some movement. You've probably seen the Pirelli building in New Haven that's going to be turned into a boutique hotel. A new hotel has been proposed in Manchester. So I think you'll see at least some new hospitality development. Retail, I go back to one of Adam's comments. We're over-retailed all across the country and here in Connecticut. So I'm really concerned about the malls. We've done some work in Enfield, and they've basically updated some of their zoning regs. They created a tax increment financing district. And there's definitely organizations out there like Goldman and York, who does economic analysis, that are really looking at those type of properties and saying they need to be reimagined. They need to be more mixed use. It can't be just the old retail. So I think that's going to be an issue that we're going to have to face across the state. I think one of the real key areas that people can, from an opportunity standpoint, is residential. I think residential is still going to be a hot commodity across the state. There's a lot of housing units that are in the pipeline. The state of Connecticut is continuing to invest in affordable housing. I believe in the governor's budget, they put $130 million over the biennium. So that's significant. We continue to have investment in the brownfields funding, so that goes towards the redevelopment of some of these mill buildings into housing. So since we're talking to ACE folks, I would certainly encourage you to really look at that sector as a growth opportunity for you. And not just new. We across the state of Connecticut, we have an aging building stock. So I encourage everybody on this Zoom call to really look at how we can reposition existing buildings get the investment that's necessary in those buildings. There's already so much energy that's been invested into the built environment. A lot of these buildings are still structurally sound. If we can find new and creative uses for them, I think it helps the whole state economy in general.
David, do you want to chime in on some of that, the funding priorities and other things that Patrick hit on?
I just, listen, when I think about real estate in the sectors, especially with COVID, I think first off, I think you need to bifurcate what you think is cyclical or transitory versus where there's a structural change, because some of the stuff's going to come back. I do think there are, in my mind, there are 3 areas where I think there's clear structural shifts that are going to happen that are going to affect real estate well beyond this summer. You know, one is retail, and we don't need to go into, I think there's broad consensus on this, but you know, the way people shop has changed, and I think lots of it is going to be permanent. You know, malls, that doesn't mean every mall, but I think destination retail and where there's a real experience, there's a need for that, and I think that will always be there. But the over retailed kind of run of the mill mall or shopping experience, I think that's going to be really challenging. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on retailers and rents for landlords in those areas. 2 is office, as I mentioned before. I think office is going to be quite challenging. But you know, again, broadly, it's always dangerous oversimplifying, but I think office space, the trend is going to be lower. I think the US on a worker per square foot basis, we were already high relative to the world. So I just think realistically, there's going to be a lot of downward pressure, and that's beyond just some of the structural vacancies we've had in our office markets with the kind of older office stock. So I think office is going to be challenging. And then on hospitality, though, I personally have a strong view that yes, leisure, travel, that's an experience that's going to be here to stay, obviously. And I think people this summer in particular is going to be huge from a tourism perspective. But I think we can't forget about business travel and conventions and what that market, how big that market was for certain hotels. I think that's going to be very slow to come back. And I personally think, you know, maybe if you did 3 business trips to Chicago in a given year, you might do 1 or 2 going forward. And I think there's a lasting impact to that industry. I think Zoom is again, cost effective and works, not in every situation. So, you know, I'd make those points on the sectors. In terms of the commitment in the governor's budget to things like housing and our housing stock, affordable housing, absolutely. I mean, cities, brownfields, there's a whole host of initiatives making sure that we're trying to make it as easy as possible and where the state can partner up in ways. So housing stock and making sure that we have new housing stock, and also that's attractive housing stock, I think is going to be important to overall how the state is viewed as a place of opportunity.
Thanks, David. Kent, I'd ask you what advice you can offer to this audience, the commercial real estate professionals, the architects, the engineers, the constructors like yourself.
I think the important thing is kind of reading between the lines on what everybody's saying is that there is opportunity in this, and there will be you know, growth in the sense of development opportunities and, you know, reuse of existing buildings, repurposing. All of those things are out there. The challenge is going to be finding the markets where it's happening and the markets where it's not happening. You know, maybe even more so than any time in the past, we have multiple things changing all at once. And it's hard enough for us to deal, like we said in Connecticut, right? It's hard for us all to deal with change. And it's hard for us to deal with change on so many different levels. You know, are people moving from urban areas back to suburban areas, changing, you know, what the trajectory that's been going for, you know, several years? Is it that they're just moving to kind of secondary cities? Are they really moving based on where there's more opportunity from a standpoint of internet infrastructure or the support infrastructure for businesses? All of these things are going to point to certain areas are going to win and certain areas are going to lose. But there's going to be work to be done, because someone moving from one location to another is the same as growth from the standpoint of the engineer or developer or the architect. If you have to change something, if a mall closes and it becomes a more distributed type of retail, or if it requires more distribution centers, that's all opportunity. So I think the thing that I've seen is a lot of people have been very negative because they look at the big numbers and they say, oh, GDP is down. Oh, yeah, we're going to grow, but it'll be 2 years before we're back to where we were 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. They come up with all these numbers, and the bottom line is none of that really matters. There will be work to do. You just have to find it. And most of the folks that I know right now that are looking are pretty busy. And I know as a developer, Adam said it right. If we could find the land, we could be doing a lot more. So there are opportunities out there. And I think there's going to be a lot more repurposing opportunities, municipalities that get out in front of that and start to help organize land transfers, start to figure out how they can take control of land and make it available. I think the public-private partnerships and the ability to make things move fast, that's the future. And there's a lot of opportunities. So I just hope people end with a happy feeling about this and not get focused on all the negatives.
Thanks, Kent. A great place to end our formal remarks, but I want to offer for all of the panelists an opportunity to give any final thoughts. And also Susan and Kathy want to be sure that we're answering any of the audience questions. So with in the absence of hearing about any specific audience questions that didn't come in through our topics, Joe, I'll start with you. I've learned my lesson, right? So we'll start with you and we'll go down the line and everyone can give a brief remark to finish us out. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. That'll just be my brief remark, is to just say thank you again. I enjoy doing this every year. While I gave that little dose of concern, I too want to say that I'm optimistic, very optimistic for the future, optimistic for Connecticut's future. Look, I'm one of those people that I'm not native to Connecticut and don't have any family here. I have 2 young children that I have to choose where to raise them, where to send them to school, and where to provide opportunity for them. And I don't have to be here. I'm not a Connecticut native. I'm here by choice. So it's a wonderful state with a lot of opportunity. I think a very bright future. Yes, of course, we have challenges, but just getting to hear and see and serve on this amazing panel with the experts that you have on here that are all contributing and doing great things is a real privilege for me. So thanks for having me. And if anybody ever wants to get in touch with me, I'll leave my information in the chat. We're here to help serve our communities in any way that we can. And I'd always love to hear feedback. So thank you again. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Joe. Enjoy your steaks.
Thank
Patrick, do you want us to go next?
Sure. Thanks everyone for the opportunity to speak with you all. We would love to have more of the firms that are on this Zoom call to be investing in our downtowns and our neighborhood commercial districts. We're very knowledgeable about the different opportunities in various communities, so please don't hesitate to reach out to myself and my staff, and we can help connect you to who the stakeholders are in each of the individual communities, the ones that are the decision makers and who can move the ball forward. I'm optimistic right now from the federal government because it looks like there's going to be a very significant American Jobs Act that comes forward that's going to provide billions of dollars to the ACE world for both heavy and civil construction and housing construction. So I would suggest you really review that bill and look to see what the opportunities are for you for when that money is coming. I don't know if people have seen the Hartford 400 plan to basically bury some of the highway system that ripped through and separated Hartford from its riverfront and pretty much took up 130 plus acres on the other side in East Hartford. That American Jobs Act and infrastructure could potentially be a game changer for some of our larger municipalities. And I guess I would leave on just one other note that there are some trade groups that are not involved in the construction side. That's like the Connecticut Lodging Association, the Connecticut Restaurant Association, Merchants Association. Tap into them because they're the first ones. They know they're the clients. and they know what the trends are happening in those particular sectors. So try to track what they're doing, and it'll help you identify new projects.
Great advice, Patrick. Thank you so much. Adam?
Sure. Yeah, thanks again for the opportunity to speak this evening and talk about commercial real estate, the markets, and to be on a distinguished panel with a lot of different viewpoints is just always really interesting, creates a lot of conversations. Yeah, what I'd like to say tonight in conclusion, similar to Kent's message earlier, is that change creates opportunity, and if people are willing to embrace the changes that are occurring, there's always tons and tons of opportunities available. And it's trying to understand, what are those changes? What are what are people looking for? There's such incredible opportunities right now in a wide range of different areas. And it's just interesting to see how the markets are going to respond. And Connecticut has gone through a lot of interesting transformations. I mean, I started my career buying aged, manufacturing plants and then converting them to flex office buildings. And I did that for a while. And then, then we did a conversion, and we started doing conversion to distribution. And I think if we end up having too much office space, I think a lot of office buildings are going to end up going to affordable housing. It's a massive need that's out there right now. That's something I'm going to start studying a little bit more carefully. Certain buildings will have the ability to convert, and it's the biggest market in the world right now. Everybody needs affordable housing. The demand is through the roof, but nobody can figure that out. The massive office campuses in Connecticut that are in these far-flung locations, they're all being recycled into other types of productive uses. Every market situation, whether it's things moving to the cloud, digital security, all these things create different types of companies and new opportunities. And I think if people pay attention to their town, their community, their region, what's going on, it's all about local market knowledge. It's about building relationships. It's understanding and trying to be creative and think about different things that you can do to create value with your partnerships, your contractor relationships, your developer relationships. And I think it's an exciting time. Change always creates a new set of opportunities, and it's just a matter of capturing those opportunities and willing to take a chance on something that maybe is a little bit different or out of the box. But I'm excited about what the next 3 to 5 years is going to bring. It's going to bring a lot of different changes in retail and all the different asset classes. So it's certainly I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities. It's just a matter of paying attention to what's going on in the economy and your local market of where you live and work. So I think it's an exciting time right now.
Thanks, Adam. Kent, final thoughts from you?
Just thank you all. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be part of this.
Thanks, Kent. And David, I'm going to give you the last word as a panelist.
Yeah, I would just say, I think to me, the most exciting thing is I think there is a macro trend. There's going to be winners and losers, as has been said a couple of times, but I think the state of Connecticut is absolutely a winner in this. And you're seeing that in the migration data from last year. We had the most migration in over 15 years. Nearly 20,000 families or individuals changed their address to Connecticut. The state was upgraded by Moody's rating service a week ago. That was the first upgrade in almost 20 years at this point in time. We have a record rainy day fund. The governor's been very vocal about maintaining tax rates and providing tax certainty, which is different than the rest of our neighborhood, at least in the tri-state area down in southern Connecticut. So I think there's a real wind to our backs from a macro perspective that I think is going to propel residential and other parts of the real estate market. So I think it's a real time to be bullish for Connecticut and lean in and make sure that we're taking advantage of the opportunity.
Thanks, David. Thank you all panelists so much. I told you all these guys are awesome. This concludes our formal program for the evening, and Susan's back here with us to deliver some closing remarks. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. We are just so grateful to all of you for taking time to be with us this evening, both our panelists and our attendees. Once again, we want to extend sincerest thanks to the speakers for sharing their time and their experience and expertise with us and their thoughts for the future of Southern New England. We hope you'll join us for our next program, which will be Tuesday, May 4th. This group of speakers has set us up beautifully for that program, which is going to be repurposing retail and industrial properties in Southern New England. And our final program of the season will be a June member guest social, which will be in person with a location and a date to be announced. So on behalf of the board, we thank our sponsors once again. We wish our panelists and all of you a good night.